Hi everyone, it's John. The 72-hour rule has been met, and so it's time for us to talk just a little bit like adults about the events that transpired in Las Vegas on Sunday, what it means for us. I want to talk about what happened. I want to talk about what that means for us individually, and then what that means for us as a nation. So that's how we're going to kind of structure our discussion today. And I want to have a frank discussion, okay? So I'm not your typical right-wing gun dude. I am a self-defender, and I just view firearms as tools. I don't have a fetish for firearms. I don't have a particular love of the machine. To me, it's just a tool that we use. So I want to talk about what happened, and once we know, kind of what went down, then and we have, I think, enough evidence to do that. Then we'll talk about what that means for you and for me. In order, what do we do? How do I defend myself against a terrorist event like we had in Las Vegas? And then what that means for us as a nation, because right now, of course, we're just embroiled in this debate. And now that we've had 3 sleeps, to think about it and to really consider, I know a lot of politicians haven't done that, but we do that because we're adults. We follow that same rule that police officers do after an officer-involved shooting. We get away from it a little bit for perspective, for grieving, the grief cycle, to respect those who lost loved ones and are fighting for their lives. And then we talk about what the lessons learned are. Okay, so now it's time to do that. So first of all, I have a couple things written down. I just want to make sure that I get them correct. A total count right this minute is that 59 people, including the murderer, died. You'll never hear me say his name. I don't think that we should say his name. I don't think we should give him any notoriety at all because he is the ultimate coward. But 58 victims of his rampage died, and we should take a moment and respect those folks. I had friends in the crowd that day. In particular, I had a good friend who was in the crowd and is an incredible self-defender and a real badass, and she stayed there all night long, lost her phone, but was a first responder, carrying people hither and yon, helping all night. Her name's Alicia, and so I know a little bit of the horror that the people that were there endured. Again, 489 injuries is what they totally have as of this morning, as of yesterday, last night. 317 of the 489 injured are out of the hospital, so that's a good sign. They don't expect the death count to rise any, and that's a good sign as well. Of course, those are horrific numbers. In terms of modern stuff, I know somebody's going to talk about Wounded Knee, but in modern times, it's the worst atrocity on American soil in history. A couple things, timing-wise, I do want to say we have some understanding now of what happened. I know some people are freaking out because they said, wait a minute, there was like 72 minutes from when things went down, from the time that first shots went off till they breached his room. Why so long? Well, I'll tell you why so long. A couple of amazing things. Number one, first shots went out at 10:05. By 12 minutes later, by 10:17, SWAT was on his floor. They knew where he was. They knew which floor he was on. But the shot stopped. He stopped firing at 10 minutes. And so since they didn't have any active killing, the SWAT cleared that entire floor. They went slow. They slow played it, slow rolled it, and I think that was a great decision. They got everybody out of there, made sure there weren't any other potential victims. I'm sure not only on that floor, but above and below it. And then, because they didn't have any shooting, so then they very carefully approached the room, busted in, found out that the murderer had taken his own life. So that makes perfect sense to me. I just think it's an incredible amount of speed and incredible bravery for those SWAT officers getting up there in 12 minutes. Incredible stuff. We know that the murderer had a couple dozen rifles with him. I don't know how many of them he used, but we'll never really know anything about him, I think. I think the reality is at this point, the FBI with their vast resources have basically found nothing about this guy. He has no online presence, didn't leave a suicide note, didn't leave anything that tells us why he did what he did. So I think it's going to be speculation from here until, the cows come home. I think that's irrelevant. Okay, so that's what went down. We know what he was doing. He was about 350 yards away from this, country music expo, and elevated 32 floors up and about 350 yards away. And so he was using a bump fire stock to fire down into that crowd from about 350 yards. He's using a 223, an AR-15 rifle to do that. That's well within its range, and he murdered people indiscriminately. Now, what does that mean for you and for me? Okay, I had a lot of people asking me, John, how do I respond to this? What do I do? Well, I think a couple things right out the bat. Let's for my self-defending crowd, for my self-protectors out there, first of all, throw out the notion that you are going to keep your rifle in the truck and go get it in this kind of an instant. It's just not going to happen. All the cops that were there that had patrol rifles in the truck, those patrol rifles weren't necessarily very useful to them. Only the guys that went up into the building were their rifles useful. And again, if you get yourself out to the truck, what you need to do with your family is get in that truck and get the heck out of there, okay? And I know that's going to anger somebody, but I'm talking about defending your family in that moment. In any kind of an issue like this, you're going to dance with what you brought. Now then, if you think that you're going to take a pistol and make an elevated shot up 350 yards and 320 feet up, you're fooling yourself. It's not even possible. Unless you're Jerry Michalek and you have a highly tuned gun with match ammo, you're just not making that shot. So don't think about that. Even if you got a red dot on your pistol or all those other things, you got, 10 or 11 minutes of angle total of tolerance stacking, and you're just not going to make that shot. Okay, not at that kind of distance. And so I just want you to recognize the answer here is not to fire back. Okay, the answer here is not to start shooting. The answer here is, number one, to recognize your run, hide, fight paradigm. And recognize that once you see things are going down, your first goal is to get out. So in a pre-planning phase, if you choose to go to a major concert, I want you, when you come in there, to look for all your exits, not just the one you came in on, but all the exits around you, so you know how to get out of the area quickly. I don't think the answer to this is to stop going to those kind of venues, but to recognize what the problems are, okay? Number two, I think that we carry our first aid kits on us all the time. I think that there's an important truth that says that we had 550 injured or so out of 20,000 people that were there, 20 to 22,000 attendees. And that represents 2.5% of the crowd. All right, 2.5% of the crowd was injured in some capacity. Some of those not close to fatally. If people fell and broke their leg or twisted their arm or whatever. I'm talking about people shot and those kind of things. But if 2.5% of the crowd, 500 people, had their first aid kit on them. They had their ankle med kit, which can go anywhere. It can get through TSA. I've taken them to ballparks. I've taken them on airplanes. Take your medical kit with you everywhere. Know how to use it. Get your first aid training, and carry your equipment. At the very least, a good tourniquet, an Israeli bandage, a chest seal. A pair of them would be best, and some gloves. That's a bare minimum kit that can save lives. And again, if every single one that you bring there can save someone's life, of your loved one if they're a target, or of somebody else if your loved ones are okay. So I think that's our first thing. Go get to a medical class. I think every person in America should have TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care, a Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care, COTCC, approved class for gunshot wounds, for mass trauma. And then carry that kit. I've used mine a couple times, not on gunshot victims, but on car wreck victims, and they come in very handy. That's what I think the biggest thing is. Number three, I think a personal thing, when you watch all the videos, one of the things that we're hearing a lot is, were there multiple shooters, or where is it? And all the conspiracy theories drive me nuts, I gotta be honest with you. And what they say is that what it tells me is that people don't understand rifle fire. They don't know what happens in an urban environment with echoes and with how loud rifle fire is when it comes by you. Rifle bullets are still supersonic for hundreds of yards. And when they come by, they're very, very loud. So you can hear that crack and then the echo, and because it's bouncing around, sound like different rates of fire. So it's an incredibly chaotic scene. Don't expect to know where the fire is coming from. Don't expect to know whatever else is going on around you. Just get your loved ones, get out, make sure that you got your first aid kit. That's the only thing you're gonna do, I think, in an individual position here because of what went down. Next, as a nation, I think we need to talk about that a little bit. And at Active Self-Protection that I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I don't think that there's many laws that would do anything about this. Somebody asked me, well, John, what laws would have prevented this? What would have done something? I'm going to be real with you. You ready? You ready for me to be real? The only thing that's going to stop this is the complete confiscation of all firearms from all private hands in America. That's what the truth is. You want to stop this from ever happening in America again, you take every rifle away from everyone. Now, do you think that's going to happen? The AR-15 is the most popular firearm in America. There are millions of them in private hands. We know that only a third of people will comply with mandatory turn-ins. You're not taking them away. It's just not happening, first of all. Second of all, that's a violation of something we hold very dear, the Second Amendment. Now, why? Well, that right is so important to us that we recognize every right has a cost, but it's so valuable that we're willing to pay the cost to put up with that. Now, I've heard people say, "But John, we got to be able to do something, even if if it'll save one life, keep this happening one time, we have to do whatever it takes." That logic breaks down. I'll guarantee if we required tomorrow every car in America to have Tesla's self-driving system in it, every single car to have the computerization to drive itself from A to B, we would cut motor vehicle related accidents down to a fraction of what they are. But we won't do it. Why not? Well, we won't do it because the cost is too high to justify the benefit. When you said to everybody in America, your car needs to have $25,000 worth of electronics installed on it today, or you can't drive it anymore, there would be hysteria in America for a reason. In the same way, we're not going to do that. The constitutional amendment to remove the Second Amendment from the Constitution requires a ratification of 37 states. It's not going to happen. So that's just not going to do it. Anything else, honestly, is security theater. And let's be real. If you go look at the FBI uniform crime reports, go look at them. Okay, so if you go look at the FBI UCR, and I'll put a link in it in the description, the last year we have statistics for is I think 2013, and something like 280 people or 260 people, I think, died from rifles of all kinds, not necessarily AR-15s, but all rifles were used in about 260 murders, whereas about 680 people died from fists and feet. This is a tiny fraction. Even if you want to talk about 30,000 gun deaths a year, which includes suicides and gang-related stuff and justified shootings and accidents, the handguns are where the real issue is and where the real problem is. Rifles aren't it. So I don't think banning rifles is going to do anything, won't do anything significant or major. And you're not, unless you say we're going to confiscate all the existing ones, which is, it's frankly an absurd notion in America, then you're not going to completely halt that. Now you might say, well, we'll just keep people from buying new ones. But the assault weapon ban that we had for 10 years in America did nothing because it did that. So I'm not a fan of that. I know there's a lot of talk right now about banning bump fire stocks or prohibiting them. I'm not a fan of the ATF at all, and I don't think the ATF does a good job of basically anything. And I don't think that banning bump fire stocks is going to do anything. Nobody even knew what they were before this, and I'll tell you that from the gun folk that I know and from using them on the range, a bump fire stock is an amateur's tool. It's a range toy. It's worthless. And I thank God I'm not going to tell you how I would have done it or what I would have done if I wanted to be a mass murderer in his place, because I'm not going to give anybody ideas. But I'm grateful that he was an absolute rank amateur. I'm grateful that he didn't use aimed fire, because many more people could have died before anybody could have done anything about it. I'm very grateful for that. I'm not grateful for anything he did. Don't hear me say I'm grateful for anything he did. Okay, that's not what I mean. I don't think banning bump fire stocks is I mean, it's going to be security theater. I have a feeling they might get that through. I don't think it'll do anything, so I oppose it. And I've told my senators and my congresspeople that I oppose it. I don't think it'll do any good. So why do it? Don't do feel-good legislation that doesn't actually make us any safer. I also think they're talking about suppressors in this, which is stupid, because suppressors weren't even involved in this. There's nothing to it. It had nothing to do with anything. So they're like, oh, but they were able to hear. Okay, let's think about that for a minute. Okay, let's just think about that. An AR-15 is about 223 coming out the barrel of an 18-inch AR-15 is about 155 decibels. A good suppressor will lower that by about 30. That's a really good suppressor. So now you're talking 125 decibels, which is the sound of a jackhammer at 4 feet, or the very loudest that your car radio or your iPod can possibly go, or a loud rock concert. This does not make a gun silent. That's Hollywood movie crap. And so it makes it hearing safe, some hearing safer inside, but usually, again, with supersonic ammo, not hearing safe. So it's ridiculous to me. What could we do? Well, then I think as a nation, what we really ought to do is we need to start granular. We need to start small. We need to think about, one, access to mental health care in our country. I'm going to say, I think this man, I don't know his motive, but it certainly seemed like his motive was to instill terror in the people, so that would be a terrorist act. We'll never know because we don't get his thing. However, again, no contact with law enforcement, no contact with mental health care. All right, we know he was a loner, a couple things like that. But I do think that understanding and knowing our world, knowing our neighbors, that will make a difference. Number two, I do think, most of times these things happen and there is a mental health component of some significant kind. And so I think as a nation, we need to have a real serious talk about mental health care and access to mental health care and help for people that are having those kind of challenges, because we can, and I think we do, prevent many atrocities every year when people get the help that they need. And I think we should expand that and take care of people in a broader way. I think that's something we can all get behind, and we should all get behind, not to reduce access to mental health care, but to increase it. So I think that's a better way. I just don't think that any kind of legislation other than that is going to do anything other than make us feel good. So we know what happened now. On a personal level, make sure, yes, you carry your firearm, but not for terrorist acts, not for mass shootings like this. You carry that for personal defense against criminal violence, and you carry your first aid kit for all kinds of things like this included. And then on a national level, I think we slow down. I think we call our legislators and we say, please don't do anything that is knee-jerk, and please don't do anything that won't make us safer instead of just making us feel safer. And I don't think bump fire stocks will do it. I don't think banning suppressors will do it. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and therefore I don't think those will be helpful. So I'd urge you to talk to your elected officials, because I think that's the way that we do it. This tragedy, of course, makes me pray, makes me think about spiritual fitness. I hope it makes you think about that as well, so that you are spending time thinking about your relationship with God, and I can't say it any more clearly, that you and Jesus have a strong relationship, and that you've told your family that you love them every chance you get, because you don't know when that last time is. And I think it also makes us think about loving our neighbor. And it's important to Jesus, it's important to me. Getting out there, knowing the people around you so that you can help them in that time of need. I'm continuing to pray for the victims, for their families, and standing by to help in any way as possible. And I think that having Americans that can carry everywhere they can to help to dissuade these kind of things in the future would be helpful as well. So one last thing on a national level, I do think that national concealed carry reciprocity makes great sense, and we got to have it. And taking care of our neighbors, we got to do it. God bless you, everybody. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you take these lessons to heart.